You're about to hear a story that never should have been told. A story about a place that was never meant to be found. The locals have a name for it. Black Hollow Forest. The kind of place you hear stories about. Hikers who never come back. Strange voices in the trees. Warnings scratched into the bark. Most people stay away, but not Chris and his friends. They were filmmakers, explorers, skeptics. They wanted to prove the legends wrong. But what they found was something much worse. Chris, Emma, Jake, Sophie and Tyler, 5 friends with a love for adventure, set out to document the legend of Black Hollow Forest, a place shrouded in mystery and eerie tales. The plan was simple. Hike deep into the woods, spend the night and film a documentary debunking the myths and legends surrounding the forest. But before they even reached the trail, the warnings began to surface. An old man at a gas station shook his head when he heard where they were going, his eyes filled with concern. "People go missing in those woods," he muttered. "Not lost. Taken." His words hung in the air, heavy with warning. They laughed it off. Ghost stories, nothing more, they thought. But as the sun dipped low and they reached the forest's edge, the laughter faded, because something felt undeniably wrong. The deeper they walked, the quieter it became, almost unnaturally so. No birds, no insects, just silence. An eerie, unsettling silence. Tyler, the only one who took the warning seriously, muttered under his breath, his eyes darting around. "Woods aren't supposed to be this quiet," he thought. By nightfall they had set up camp, their tents forming a small circle. The fire crackled, cameras rolled, and Chris began his first interview of the night.
The legend says that Black Hollow Forest doesn't let people leave once they enter, that those who enter never return, lost forever in its depths.
He smirked at the camera, a hint of defiance in his eyes.
Guess we'll be the first to prove it wrong.
But as the firelight flickered, Sophie shivered, feeling a chill run down her spine.
"Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" she asked, her voice trembling.
No one answered, but the unease was palpable. But they all felt it, a shared sense of dread. And then the whispers began, soft and haunting. Soft, just beyond the fire's glow. Voices, calling their names one by one. The next morning, Jake was gone. Vanished without a trace. His tent was unzipped from the inside as if he left in a hurry. His backpack was still there, untouched and undisturbed, his boots, his camera. But Jake vanished. Panic set in among the group. They searched for hours, calling his name desperately, but every time they turned around, the trail looked different, confusing them. It was as if the forest itself was shifting, playing tricks on them. And then they found his camera, still recording. Emma hit play, Jake's voice whispering, panicked.
"Something's following me. It's not an animal. I can feel it. It's not a person. It's..."
Static. And then a shadow moved in the trees behind him. A shape, tall, thin, watching, and then he was gone just like that. Fear turned to terror. They tried to leave, follow the GPS back to the car, but the compass spun wildly. The trail was gone. And then Sophie screamed, carved into a tree, fresh, deep gouges, 4 words, "You can't leave." That night the voices came back, this time closer.
We stay together, no one goes off alone.
But Tyler wasn't listening, his face was pale, his hands trembled.
"I hear my sister. She's calling for me."
"Tyler, your sister died 3 years ago."
But Tyler was already walking into the trees, and just like that, he was gone. The next day they found the cabin, deep in the woods, half buried in the earth, old, abandoned. Inside, dust and decay, rotten wood and the stench of death. And on the walls, photographs of missing people, some from decades ago. And in the centre of them all, a black and white photo of Jake, Jake, who had vanished just yesterday, and yet the photo was old, decades old. Emma's breath hitched.
Chris, what if they never really disappear?
What do you mean?
Emma swallowed hard.
What if they stay here forever?
And then the door slammed shut, and the whispers turned into screams. Chris ran. He didn't look back. Didn't stop when Sophie's screams cut off. Didn't stop when Emma tripped, sobbing, begging for help. Didn't stop when his flashlight flickered, revealing figures standing in the darkness, watching, waiting. Chris didn't stop until he broke free from the trees. But when he collapsed onto the road, gasping for breath, he realized he was alone. No Emma, no Sophie, no Jake, no Tyler, just himself. And the memory of those whispers. But the forest wasn't done with him yet. Because as he stumbled back into town, desperate for help, a sheriff looked up from his desk, shook his head, and pointed to the wall behind him. A missing persons board. Chris froze. Because there, pinned among the dozens of lost faces, was a photograph. His photograph, Chris Walker, missing since 1998. And in the reflection of the sheriff's window, Chris saw them, the shadows, the ones from the woods, watching, waiting, and then everything went black. If you ever find yourself walking through an unfamiliar forest and the trees seem too quiet and you hear a voice you know, don't answer, because some places weren't meant to be found. And some things never let you go.